This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And the NBA Finals is definitely underway. We're knee-deep in it, but that does not mean that stuff is happening behind the benches, behind the arena, behind the hype, behind the allure of who's going to host the O'Brien Trophy. Much to discuss, much to keep our eyes on once that trophy is hoisted, because now all 30 teams are back in play to make this a resounding offseason to look forward to. And to discuss the things that are happening in the association, you know I got to do it. My right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, dime man contributor, writer for one of the illest websites, www.shawsports.net. Big Kahuna, PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. What's going on, man?
What's good? What's good? Salute to all the fans, listeners of NBA Baseline. Another great show on tap for all our listeners. Hope you're tuning in. Hope you're giving us those ratings on iTunes as well. But can't wait to jump into this week's topics, brother.
Yeah, man, we've got a great show on tap. I know that we're doing our thing, discussing the NBA Finals, but we clearly cannot ignore some of the things that we need to kind of start getting our head right and start making sure that we keep our eyes focused and peeled at the bigger picture, which is what will happen once the NBA Finals is concluded, because then we run right into these scenarios with the NBA draft and possible offseason free agency acquisitions and place and trades possibly. So a lot of stuff that's happening, but a great show nonetheless for us to get into and for you and yours to listen to. In this week's show, we are definitely going to have our eyes fixated on maybe one or two things that we think may have an impact, a significant impact of what we may expect to see for the summer. Could possibly be within those CalSpiracy theories of some sorts. I've just been on my CalSpiracy theory shtick quite often, but I don't think that anything changes from that. So Shaw and I will kind of give our own spiracy theory, so to speak, of what might happen in the summer to shake things up. And then a little bit later on, you know, we were sitting there thinking to ourselves in our segment of The Drop, what would be a good way to kind of wake up the cerebrum a little bit, the cerebellum, you know what I'm saying? Probe the mind a little bit, kind of like how Common and Most Def used to do. Well, what if we tried to reevaluate the 2015 NBA draft? We made much of the guys that were picked, where they were selected, and the teams that selected them. What if we did a little remix of our own? So a little bit later on, we're going to give you the baseline remix of the 2015 NBA draft. And then also on the ISO, great interview my man Shaw had the opportunity to look at in a segment series that we're looking forward to give to you, which is those that are getting prepared for this upcoming NBA draft. Malachi Richardson from the Syracuse Orangemen. He is definitely one that eyes have their eyes fixated on. And we're going to have an opportunity. My man Shaw sits down and talks with him as he gets himself prepared for the draft. So great show on tap. We appreciate you and yours hopping on board with the NBA Baseline. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. We always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. And we say hashtag up the baseline. Let us know who you are and what you're about. Available on all the major platforms, available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft Tune, and Player FM. Also available on Google Music. And you can also find the NBA Baseline on the Roku channel for Shaw Sports. So be sure to download any one of those platforms. And one of the things we always encourage our peoples and our fans and our listeners and those who are just interested in basketball in general, if you take a listen, download, and discuss, we always ask that you give us a shout out, give a rating, give us your comments, give us your thoughts, anything to engage feedback and conversation. We always invite, because we love doing this and we do it for you. Well, you know how we do, and you know how we like to set it off. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
I
down.
put you down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And it's the season of conspiracies. Tis the season while everyone's eyes and minds, ears and hearts are all fixated on who's going to hoist that championship, the Golden State Warriors or the Cleveland Cavaliers. And sometimes we tend to forget, that there's 28 other teams that might, have a say in the way that we follow basketball for the rest of the summer. And what better way to kind of engage that whole premise and thought process than by throwing a little bit of conspiracy theories out there. Shaw, like one of the things that I often find interesting is that what might happen, what could happen, what we think might happen over the course of the next couple of weeks will definitely lend to some great storylines and topics of conversations that not as media people, but also, the millennials and the social mediaites and NBA followers alike, they're going to want to be sitting there speculating, like, what were some of these teams thinking? What one thing could possibly happen in the summer that could clearly shake things up? And we've seen it. LeBron James, when he makes a decision, it's like a domino effect to everything else happening in the NBA. So from your perspective, Shaw, what are one or two things that you think could possibly happen for this summer that can make us go, oh, no, they didn't?
I think what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start in Chicago. And we've had some conversation about the Bulls all throughout the season and where they've been heading as an organization, as a roster. A lot of rumors about who they would trade, who they might not trade, who they maybe would even retain in free agency. But I think this summer you're going to see the Chicago Bulls make some significant moves. They've been linked to Jahlil Okafor already. Joakim Noah has said he doesn't want to return. Pau Gasol has said he'd potentially return, but he's obviously going to look elsewhere. They've also tried to trade Jimmy Butler. They'd like to trade Derrick Rose, but I don't think that's going to happen. But one way or another, I think you're going to see a very, very different Chicago Bulls team going into the 2016-2017 NBA season. And I think that's going to start with the potential of maybe even a Jimmy Butler move as they try to get younger and try to build for the future.
Shaw, I want to add on to some of that change that you're talking about. I don't think it's so much as a CalSpiracy theory as I is maybe a Cal spiritual thought process for some of these teams who found themselves quite heavy in this year's NBA playoffs in the Eastern Conference. If you're the Atlanta Hawks or if you're the Boston Celtics, given the type of season that you have and given where your team's deficiencies truly lies, like for the Boston Celtics, clearly in the front court. And if you're the Atlanta Hawks, you may not wind up having one of your main pieces in your front court, but you may be changing the way that this team is going to play, because I don't think Jeff Teague is going to be an Atlanta Hawk by the time that this season begins for the upcoming season. And I don't think that Al Horford will be a center for the Atlanta Hawks for this upcoming season either. It would be really interesting to see, as you mentioned, Joakim Noah, what possible landing spots he could find himself being in, because his services can clearly be needed for guys that need a tougher interior physical presence, someone who can clearly rebound the basketball, clearly defend, and really be a vocal leader from a defensive perspective. Teams like the Boston Celtics, which I know sorely are lacking in that, and teams like the Atlanta Hawks, who may need their Horford replacement, that's a possible two destinations where Noah's skill set could really, really benefit both of those teams.
Yeah, and Noah's a guy who's going to be sought after. There's not much question about that. The injuries have definitely mounted up, and last season was completely a wash. But I think people still realize he was only 2 seasons away from being a runner-up in the MVP or whatever it was. So Noah's an extremely valuable talent, and if Chicago is unable to retain his services, he'll definitely find some work somewhere else. And as you mentioned, lots of moving pieces where you could see him go and replace somebody else, like Al Horford in Atlanta, if he were to move on. There's a trade that we're going to talk about a little bit later that Atlanta is involved in potentially. That really could change the landscape of what they're trying to do with their organization, thus affecting where Noah and guys like Gasol end up as well in their destination. So no matter what, though, I think Chicago is definitely going to be a much, much different team than we're used to seeing in previous seasons.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal, Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our segment of The Breakdown. As we move forward, Shaw, so what other aspects of possible crazy things could we look forward to seeing happen? I mean, we've already seen how the coaching savagery has shook things up. And clearly now with some new coaches being implemented, I'm going to go ahead and use one of mine for a moment to throw something crazy out there, because I think we are already seeing that there may possibly be a transition in understanding and philosophy sort of thinking and the savvy of Phil Jackson and what might tend to happen. Let's not pretend that I don't think that Carmelo Anthony and Phil Jackson are completely vibing on the same level. And I feel like even the hire of Jeff Hornacek, to me, is the kind of hire that saves face for Phil Jackson, but at the same time also still leaves room for him to implement, quote unquote, the grandmaster plan of things. I really would not be surprised if Phil Jackson does his Zen-like mastery and probes into the mind of Carmelo Anthony, kind of like in Independence Day, since Independence Day will probably be happening around free agency time. If he figures out a way to kind of, what do they call that? that mind takeover technique, so to speak, and gets Carmelo Anthony to figure out a way for him to release his no trade option, to put himself out there on the market for the New York Knicks to shop him to another possible contender, so that Phil Jackson and Jeff Hornacek and Steve Mills can figure out a way to put together a basketball team that has more sustainable success over the next few years moving forward for the New York Knicks.
Well, I think the Knicks are an organization that they want to obviously be at the forefront of when it comes to attacking free agents and bringing in talent. And Melo right now probably does not actually get them a whole lot out there, especially obviously knowing that he only wants to stay in New York currently. But if he were to waive his no trade clause, and the Knicks were in essence to try to entertain shopping, it'd be interesting to see what the market value for him would be. It clearly wouldn't give back the same haul that it did the Denver Nuggets, X amount of years ago, because I don't think you can get those multiple first round draft picks and even valuable players that you could use in your system currently. He could still get you two guys, maybe a draft pick, depending on the situation, depending on who's desperate. And that would kind of lead me into my next, CalSpiracy theory, if you will, is that I don't think the Boston Celtics are going to have a whole lot of success this summer in free agency, and I think they're gonna end up overpaying for somebody mediocre. Just because they have all the picks that and they can't keep them because they can't keep all those guys even on the roster. But maybe if Melo were to waive his no trade clause, and I can't see him doing that before the season starts, but maybe that's somebody Boston could try to attract sometime in the.
So you think out of the pure desperation, because it's seeming like the Boston Celtics has to do something given the success that the Celtics have exhibited over the last couple of years, that they're going to overpay for mediocrity? Because I'm kind of playing it on the opposite end, that I think some of these players really kind of still see the big picture. Like someone like Al Horford, maybe he still thinks that there's still one more big payday left if he's going to be a part of the wheeling and dealing from the TV deal. And like most guys who are going to probably sign for that short-term deal, 1 or 2 years possibly, and then be a part of the larger money when the salary cap opens up a little bit more. To me, I think that if you're someone like that, and if you're a team like the Boston Celtics, you can afford to throw some money out there for that guy, because you're talking about a significant improvement for this basketball team within that 1 to 2 year window if the Boston Celtics don't look to utilize their trades in order to acquire somebody who's already locked into a long-term deal.
Well, I think, they have the ability to pay like everybody else does, but I'm saying, with their current draft picks, if they were going to try to shake a trade loose from somewhere else, again, all the familiar names that are always thrown out there, they have all the interest in Kevin Love, they have all the interest in DeMarcus Cousins and guys like that. I don't know that they can pull somebody else, but somebody like that on that level, if you will, they may end up, again, I can't even give you a name right now, but they may end up trading 2 or 3 guys, and then also try to bring in, like an Al Horford type free agent, if you will, just so that they say they've made a move and they've shown some progress, and it could be to their benefit per se. But I just don't see the marked improvement happening for the Boston Celtics in the manner in which so many people are predicting. Oh, they have all these assets, all these things are going to go well for them. I just don't see it. I think Boston's going to overpay. They will get marginally better, but not the big leap that everybody's expecting to take next season.
Shaw, who are you expecting from your Shawshankery thought process? Who are you expecting to take a step back that has shown a level of either consistency, who has been already a part of the upper echelon when we talk about elite basketball teams or teams that have sustained a high level of success over recent years? Who's probably likely the one to take a step back?
Well, I think a step back from an elite teams is you would probably look no further than maybe even the Clippers. And if you were to consider them elite to begin with. I think this is a team that is just, they're snake bitten and they just never seem to be able to come over the hump. I'm not sure what their process is going to be over the summer. Doc Rivers obviously being the general manager or president of basketball operations, if you will. And if they're trying to make moves to trade Blake or not, because again, we've already said they'll be taking pennies on dollars if they were trying to do that. What becomes available for them, at the wing position, which is something that they clearly need, but they don't have the cap space like everybody else does. So the Clippers are a team that I'm looking to see what are they going to do this summer, and I don't think that it's going to be much, and I just don't think that they're going to get much better than they have been. But my final point, before we move on, and if I definitely want to give you your opportunity to speak, this isn't going to happen this summer, but I'm going to say it right now. I think Anthony Davis is going to be requesting a trade from the New Orleans Pelicans by season's end next year. I just feel like this is a roster that same thing. Snake bitten, can't stay healthy, and I don't know that they're going to have the improvement that they're going to want to see, even if they get everybody back healthy next season. So mark it here first. Unibrow.
Unibrow. The unibrow taking off elsewhere. Okay. I love it. I actually love it. I'm not sure why people have not kind of entertained that thought process as well, too, because I think people are fixated on believing that Anthony Davis is the fixture, is the mainstay, and has to be the mainstay, given the fact that the New Orleans Pelicans has not really sustained anything successful, and that we could look at them the same way that we'll be looking at teams like the Los Angeles Clippers, where they do just enough for us to be enamored with them, to fall in love with them, but they don't do enough for us to applaud them and praise them and really give them their just due. And maybe part of that is geared towards the fact that the management, general managers, have not really done the greatest of jobs in supplementing the necessary pieces to sustain a high level of excellence. You know what? To add on top of that, Shaw, I probably think that a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, expect for them to take a major step back. Not because they're going to lose personnel, but simply because I really don't think that people understand that the structure and the decision-making process up for the last few years is kind of like, putting a fake version of crazy glue on a chair already broken. It's going to only hold up for so long. And then once you start putting pressure on that chair, eventually it's going to break again. And then you just basically have to accept the fact that you got to start from scratch. And I don't know if whether or not that's exactly what the Memphis Grizzlies have done by hiring Fizdale, but I really feel like a lot of this still comes down to them getting out in front of how they're trying to make people see that they're planning to go in a different direction in how they want this basketball team to play and compete in a division which will still maintain a very high level. See, that's the one caveat about some of these teams. These teams, we give them opportunity to turn things around, but unfortunately they sink in a division where they don't have the luxury to do that for an extended period of time. Or else the stigma is going to be that they're just a bad basketball team, and they'll always be a bad basketball team hovering at the bottom of their division.
Well, you talk about a team that's probably going to be willing to overpay in terms of, trying to bring marked free agents to their roster. And I think that is Memphis because they know what it is. Conley has said what it is. Like, listen, I'm willing to come back if you find some improvement. And there's the same thing that they haven't had shooting for the last 5 or 6 years now. And they just continue to not address that in the way that they need to. So I think you're 100% correct there. You can see the Grizzlies really fall back in the Western Conference in general, even with, again, getting a new coach and trying to see what system he puts into, not saying that Fizdale will not be a good coach. I just don't know what his roster is going to be like. And there's a lot of questions going for the Memphis Grizzlies overall.
Cal Lee Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast, as we get into our CalSpiracy Shawshankery theories about what's going to happen in this offseason, what things are going to shake up. All right, Shaw, I'm gonna play coy with you on this final part of the segment before we move things along. Shaw, we remember way back when we had our show, we had our thing called Hoops Redemption. Guys that we thought this upcoming season, they needed to bounce back. They needed to give themselves and give fans a reason for them to continue to cheer, to support them, to applaud what they bring to the table, not just in their game, but what they're trying to do as far as supplanting their legacy in the game of basketball. And I feel like part of that is going to have, again, an impact on part of what we've been talking about, that some of these players who choose to go out in free agency, and I know obviously people think that I'm talking about obviously Dwight Howard here, but I'm actually talking a little bit more than that. There are a couple of basketball players who are in that realm, that segment, but I'm only going to choose 2 because I feel like with these 2, they're the ones that are going to stand out the most. So obviously one is Dwight Howard. The other person that I'm thinking about, and he also comes from the Houston Rockets, Josh Smith, right? So, Shaw, I got to ask you, Hoops Redemption, who do you think has best the likelihood to bounce back and really help whoever it is that they choose to play basketball for most effectively?
I don't think there's much of a question for me simply because of just in terms of where the talent level still seems to lie. Dwight Howard still does more for his basketball team on a regular basis than Josh Smith is able to do. And it just seems, it's sad to see how the decline of Smith has occurred over the last 2 years, because he was a very talented guy in his role. A guy who could rebound, a guy who could block shots, and was very adept at passing the ball. Obviously, was never a great scorer, but was able to score in the teens and do enough. But I think Howard is really the guy that you're looking at here too, who's going to be able to obviously command a large salary, but to go to a spot where he can really kind of be a feature guy. Smith is far from that, and arguably has never been a guy that you could feature, on a team regardless anyway. So to me, it's Dwight Howard head and shoulders above Josh Smith when you're comparing those two guys.
CalSpiracy theory alert! CalSpiracy theory alert!
Of course,
I'm going with Josh Smith. I'm going with the guy who, this not because of injuries. It may be because of attitude. It may be because of he's been promised something, and clearly teams have decided, the personnel, coaches, whatever the case may be, has decided to go against the grain from him, and he's been stained and been tainted with being considered a cancer or someone that is really non-productive for a basketball team. Let's just call it for what it is. The Houston Rockets last season was an absolute mess. Even when they let him go elsewhere to the Los Angeles Clippers, and then when the Clippers wanted to have nothing to do with them, comes back to the Houston Rockets, and they still didn't use this guy. I feel like Josh Smith has the most to gain and really nothing to lose, because he flew so far under the radar this past season that any team who's going to take a guy 6'9", still with like almost a 7 foot like type wingspan, still has the ability to play the 4, possible 5 position now that the NBA teams love to play small ball. If Josh Smith is playing under a veteran like head coach that really can calm his temperament down, kind of put his mindset right about how he should shoot the basketball and how he can fit within the system of play, I really think that he can produce for a lot of teams because he still has game. And it's one thing that I can say about Josh Smith that I still cannot say about Dwight Howard, even for the 10 plus years that Dwight Howard's been in the league. Josh Smith can still improve certain aspects to his game. And yes, he can still shoot the basketball. As horrific as his shooting is, 30-something% for 3/4 of his career, he can still shoot the ball. And to me, that still carries weight. If his athleticism still stays at a certain level at that position, I think he can contribute. And I think that he can help teams, especially that need a veteran guy, a 6-man guy, a scoring kind of guy he can fit in that offense. I think he can come out there and do some damage, bro.
Well, I mean, it's always going to be a matter of fit, and depends where he goes. My question with Smith has always been, what system suits him best? Is he an up-tempo guy, or is he someone that you play in a half-court offense? Or is he neither one of those things, and just someone who should be trying to, he should be trying to offensive rebound and get some of those garbage points and playing defense and being a slasher type? I think for me, I just never really knew where to place Smith. In Atlanta, it was more of a half-court system. In Detroit, I want to say kind of the same thing. He didn't really go with the up-tempo offense that the Clippers were trying to run. He came to Houston, had some decent success, when he came back to Houston, I should say, this past season. And then he was buried back on the bench again. So for me, it's like I just don't know if he knows where he fits in, from a system standpoint. And so wherever he goes, and even if he does stay in Houston with Mike D'Antoni being there now too, they just got to figure out a way to utilize him so that he can maximize his skill set.
Well, one thing that I definitely think needs to happen for Josh Smith is he needs to build a rapport with whatever team he's playing for with their point guards. I don't think he built nearly the kind of rapport that was necessary with Patrick Beverley, with Ty Lawson, with James Harden. And I think that that's been to his detriment. Now, in fairness, he never really had that opportunity because he played with the Atlanta Hawks, and the Atlanta Hawks really got by with the ISO Joe Johnson, ISO Joe, Al Horford, Josh Smith combination when Joe Johnson was more of your point forward type of guy. I really don't think that he's ever been comfortable with where he's been because he's had to command the ball as much as guys like Joe Johnson has. And now his role has diminished to such a level where he has to rely on a quality point guard getting him the ball because he's a ball dominant forward. And I think in this case, again, it goes back to my point where if you put him in a good situation, in a good system, and he tries to build a rapport with the point guards that are running that offense, that are running that system, I think that he can redeem himself at a much more rapid effect than my expectations of what will happen to Dwight Howard, because I just feel like the pressure is completely off Josh Howard. But I still think that at a young early 30 age, he can still produce at that level, at that position, because he already has his skill set catered to advance wherever the game moves forward. Let's ask some stuff, man. I love when we do this type of thing. Kudos to you, Shaw, for coming up with this topic, man.
Oh man, anytime. I love, we can just stir the pot a little bit, and I hope everybody gets their minds thinking and trying to figure out, okay, what are some of the wild things that can happen, and not wild for just for the sake of being outrageous, but things that you think just really need to happen, but some teams might be afraid to do from a social standpoint, but really need to do to make their teams and rosters better. So thank you so much for tuning in. But more importantly, CL, thank you for your awesome CalSpiracy Theories. They are always a staple of the show, and hope everybody enjoyed them.
And what say you, listeners of the Baseline NBA podcast? Hit us up either on our Facebook page or through our Twitter. Give us some of your CalSpiracy theories about what you might think will happen in this upcoming offseason that will shake things up and get us yammering about what will happen here in the association. You're tuned to the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was the breakdown.
Isolation, top of the key, and then spread the floor. Let them have a one-on-one opportunity.
Time to go ISO with the Baseline.
This is Warren Shaw from Dime Magazine and the Baseline NBA podcast. Having a little brief discussion with our man from Syracuse, Malachi Richardson. What's going on, Malachi? How you doing?
Hey, how's everything going? Good.
Great here. I mean, but the focus is you, man. You have a lot going on for you, a lot on your plate as you get ready for the NBA draft. But before we get into all that, I want to get a little bit, on your history, man. And you're from Jersey, brother. So tell me what it was like growing up in Brick City and honing your basketball skills.
Man, it was great. Started playing basketball when I was about 4 years old. My mom was the main one to really put the ball in my hands. Always played up in the local leagues, and ever since then, things really took off for me, especially when I got to high school. Able to play on the AAU circuit with Team Final, based out of Philly, and was able to get to Syracuse.
And at what point of your basketball ascension, if you will, did you realize that maybe you wanted to try to make this NBA thing and give that thing a go?
Growing up as a youngin', I've always wanted to play in the NBA. My parents, my whole family just about always watched basketball. Watching it on TV, I always thought, man, I want to be able to do that one day. I want to be there on TV playing. Grew up a Lakers fan, big Kobe Bryant fan. So I think that was really the person that really inspired me. Basketball has always been my first choice. Always had a love for the game.
Man, Malachi, you living kind of reckless out there in Jersey, rooting for the Lakers. How did that actually come to pass, man?
Man, I don't know. I have no clue. But growing up, I always watched Kobe. Loved the Lakers back when Shaq was there. Always was a big Kobe fan. I watched his every move. Even though Philly and AI was right there, I always had to think of Kobe Bryant, man. Nah,
man, you can't go wrong with that, man. That's the Mamba. So, no disrespect on that at all, too, man. So, listen, being out there and obviously playing you played in AAU and you played in a lot of different environments in your basketball career. Now, even playing at Syracuse and, going through all the rigors of the different environments that they've played, where do you think, even going back to, when you were 4 years old playing hoops or whatever like that, what's the toughest basketball environment that you've ever had to play in?
I wouldn't say there's been too many crazy tough ones, but I would say back in high school playing at Linden High when I was up at Catholic for a year. That was pretty tough. When I got to college, playing at Pitt was pretty tough. And I think playing in the Final Four wasn't tough, but it was hard. It was different playing in front of 75,000 people.
Yeah.
That's not the average amount of people at a basketball game on any level. So I wouldn't say it was tough, but it was definitely different.
Discussing, basketball even outside of that now, what's the hardest life lesson that you've had to learn? And even let's go on two-part. What's the hardest life lesson you've had to learn playing basketball, and what's the hardest life lesson you had to learn off the basketball floor?
Probably just you're never going to be perfect, and you won't be able to make everyone happy. But whether it's a decision you make off the floor or really just things you do on the floor, you're always going to have doubters, you're always going to have haters. You got to be able to live with yourself. Definitely learn that I have to be happy within myself before I can please anyone else. I think that's definitely been the main thing I've learned from it all.
So is that just an accumulation of things that have happened to you, or is there something so specific at some point you realize you're like, you know what? like not everyone is ever going to like what I'm going to do? Is it something that specifically happened, or is it just, kind of, life lessons overall?
Mainly just been just growing up and playing basketball, whether it was not going to our local high school or transferring schools or going to Syracuse or leaving Syracuse. It's been a bunch of different things. But you just can never, you're not going to please everyone.
True.
I think that's been the main thing I've definitely learned. Is that hype out you. You got to make yourself happy first and foremost.
So playing at Syracuse obviously put you on a big stage, as a freshman. How do you think you handled your first and only season at Syracuse?
In my opinion, I think I had a really good year. I had some ups and downs, but I think I handled the adversity very well.
Yeah.
As a freshman, I was able to get to the Final Four and do things that a lot of people wish they would have done. I think I had a great year at Syracuse. I learned a lot. Had great teammates. Learned from those guys. Learned a lot from my coaching staff.
I think that's a great point, and I think you guys definitely burst upon the scene and surprised some, if you will. And I'm sure that was much to your happiness and pleasure as a guy who's worked hard to get to where he is. And question for you in terms of, did you think about this going there? I mean, I know a lot of guys don't like to admit it, or didn't really know it was going to come about, but did you go there thinking that you might be one and done, or is it something that just kind of came about based on the season that you had?
Going into college, my goal was always to become a professional player, but I wasn't too focused on whether it would be after a year or even after two. I just wanted to go in, play as well as I could, and everything would take care of itself. It just so happened that the chips fell where they did this year, and I was able to get out of there after 1 year.
So you're entering the draft as kind of a hot prospect, in terms of your draft stock is rising. I don't know how much you pay attention to that, but, by the draft boards and the quote-unquote experts and things out there, what type of player will a team be getting if they draft Malachi Richardson?
Very confident player, great scorer, defender, just a total team player. I try not to pay too much attention to the different draft blogs, all that different stuff. Can't really worry about that. You just got to go out, do what you got to do. You got to think, do what you think is best.
And what's the skill that you have? I mean, you mentioned a few good things there that teams will like to have, but what skill do you think is going to translate the most immediately for you on the next level?
I would say definitely being able to shoot the ball. People may look at the numbers from college, but I don't think that really will matter. I know I'll be able to work on my craft all day, every day, especially being a pro. I have to worry about class. I think everything will translate, and I'll be able to show up a lot more than I did in college. So
that's the one thing that should be able to go over right away, but what's something that you do want to continue to work on as you prepare for the NBA draft coming up in a few weeks?
I just want to really work on everything. I want to definitely work on my body, get a little bit bigger, continue to eat healthy, just become a stronger player. Definitely want to work on finishing around the basket. Just learning more about the game, watching a lot more film, just learning.
So you mentioned earlier Kobe was your favorite player growing up and anything like that. Do you have any current ties to the league in terms of NBA players, guys that you can call on and ask for some advice to help you through this process?
Yeah, I talk to Chris McCullough and Raheem Christmas very often.
Of course.
I always go to those two guys. They've been through the draft process, so I can always go to those two guys just to ask them anything.
And if you wouldn't mind sharing just like one piece of advice that either one of them have given you that you really kind of taken to heart to help you through this.
I was out to dinner with Chris McCullough one night, and he was just asking me what I thought I was going to do. And I said I was still stuck in between on whether I wanted to enter or not. He was just saying, man, you just got to go. You got to do what you think is best for you and your family, whether that's staying in school or leaving. But you definitely want to make sure your decision will make you happy, not everyone else. I think that definitely helped me out when deciding to actually enter.
So McCullough, Christmas, your parents, people like that have all helped you, with your basketball development, even on and off the court, if you will. But who else do you trust, when it comes to giving you just good life advice and things that you want to, accomplish as a young man and growing up in the world today?
I mean, I can always go to my family. Anyone in my family is always there for me. Whether it's my brother, my sister, dad, mom. I've always been able to talk to my family, and even my AAU coaches, Aaron Burton, Rob Brown. Grew up with those guys. They've seen me grow from a middle schooler to the man I am today. So I think being able to talk to them.
I think it's great to have a wide support system, but in the NBA, a lot of push and pull going on with that too. And you have to cut down some of the new hanger-ons that are come your way. What advice have you gotten, regarding that, with, listen, how are you going to keep some of the new people that want to get a piece of you as they see you on the come up?
Man, just always keep your circle tight. They weren't with you when you didn't really have anything, or when no one really knew who you were, and that means something. If they've been there since day one, that means they've been there for you, through the ups and downs, through the bad shooting games, through the tough losses. All that stuff it means a lot. Good stuff there, Malachi. Good stuff. You have a pretty interesting arc in terms of your draft projection, though. I've always wondered with guys, that could go anywhere in the draft, if you will, anywhere from the middle of the first round, end of the first round, early second round. How do you narrow out who you're going to work out for? How do you and your team decide, okay, well, there's roughly maybe 15 teams, 12 teams, whatever it is that that can have an interest in drafting you? Do you try to work out for all of those guys, or where you just think you might have the best fit? How does that work out for you? Really, you just want to narrow it down, take in consideration what those teams have and what they may be interested in. And I always want to work out for a team that has interest in you. And I think that's the most important part. Just being able to figure out where the draft range is actually at, and just having an opportunity to work out for teams no matter what, I think is always a blessing. So I think that's another important factor. So, you're not obviously in the league yet, and a lot can be determined. I spoke to a guy like Miles Turner last year who had a really great opportunity. I think drafted by Indiana. Then they go out and get some insurance for their bigs, and they get a guy like a veteran like Jordan Hill, and it kind of changed his playing situation to begin the year. And he really kind of persevered and battled through. But even though you don't know where you're going to go yet, do you have specific goals in mind for yourself in your rookie season? I know it's hard to kind of determine that right now, especially not knowing your playing situation, but are there certain things that, I want to achieve this in my first year in the league? Honestly, I just want to be able to go out and get minutes and become the best I can be, learn as much as possible, and just become a better player and a person. I think that me growing off the floor is just as much as important as me growing on the floor. Just being around a great organization, learning from our vets. Okay, I like that too, man. So a couple quick hitters before I let you get out of here. I want you to finish this sentence for me there, Malachi, okay? Basketball is what? Life. Definitely life. My world overall is about basketball. But I've always learned not to let basketball use you. Always use basketball. Well said. So basketball is life. So now, how are you going to beat this one? Family is what? Everything. Good. Family is always going to be there for you. Family is always going to ride or die with you. And if you didn't have basketball, what would you be doing with yourself, man? In school and get my degree. In what? And probably maybe become communications. So do you think that you'd still want to be in the sports field using communications, or, maybe working for a marketing firm or something like that? And what area of the communications field? I wasn't really sure. I know I just wanted to be in a communications major. I'll probably have to go out to the sports field for sure. And what do you do? Everybody needs that little bit of time away. How are you spending some time away from the game? What are some things that you relax with? Whether it be movies, just hanging out, the mall, music, whatever it is. Just hanging out with family and friends. Being able to get away from basketball is always good sometimes. I think definitely just being able to hang out and relax a little bit, take my mind off around family and friends. Well, it seems like you have a great head on your shoulders, man. And I really enjoyed having the opportunity to speak with you. I wish you nothing but the most success in this upcoming draft, wherever you land. And I thank you for allowing me to speak with you before, became super famous. And hopefully we'll get to do this again down the road sometime, brother. Thanks, bro. Appreciate it.
Time now for the drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And this week in the drop, Shaw and I got to thinking, what would happen if we remixed the 2015 NBA draft? The top 10 players. What would have really happened if guys were not selected in the numbers that they were selected in? And it got me to thinking, man, would Jahlil Okafor been happy if he was number 2 with the Los Angeles Lakers rather than D'Angelo Russell? Would D'Angelo Russell not be considered a pariah for pulling the same kind of stunt in Philly if he wasn't playing for the Los Angeles Lakers? So, really interesting to us that we would say to ourselves, after a year of watching the top 10 players that were drafted in last year's draft show their talents for their respective teams, what would have happened if their names weren't called at the numbers that they were called? So, Shaw, I'm going to start with you, man. Let's remix this 2015 NBA draft. Would guys that you are looked at from 1 to 10, who really would not have been where you would have selected them if you were the general manager or if you were that organization that had the opportunity to make that choice? Would you have selected the guys that you have selected that were placed in last year?
Well, I mean, I would look at it from maybe a slightly different perspective in terms of, really who was the top 10, in terms of the NBA. And if they could go back right now, how would the draft take place? And to me, I think the Lakers would not take D'Angelo Russell. I don't think they'd even take Jahlil Okafor. I think the number 2 pick in the draft still would have been, sorry, not still, but would have been Kristaps Porzingis. Towns obviously still goes number 1. He had an amazing season. Looks to be a future Hall of Fame talent, and I don't say that lightly. But I think number 2, the Lakers, knowing what they know now, might have taken Porzingis.
But you know what, Shaw? Kristaps Porzingis would have been a Los Angeles Laker had Phil Jackson still been a head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers, had Jim Buss no longer been running basketball operations, had Jeannie Buss had a say in running operations for the Los Angeles Lakers, because then she would have gotten her fiance running things for the Los Angeles Lakers. And since Phil Jackson was high on Kristaps Porzingis, I completely and absolutely believe you from that regard. He would have been a number 2 pick.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it would have been right. I think my shocker...
And we would no longer hear Stephen A. Smith yelling for Jim Buss's head to be removed from office of running things for the Los Angeles Lakers.
That's some of the fun stuff. So I don't like to see that happen. But I think my shocker and maybe not even a shocker, but if redrafting right now, and I think the number 3 pick wouldn't be Jahlil Okafor. I think it would have been Devin Booker. And then I think the 76ers would have, had their shooter. Knowing what they know now, again, Booker would have made the most sense for me as a number 3 pick. I think Okafor then probably would have slid to the Knicks. Winslow probably goes where he's supposed to go, and at 5, Hazonia dropping out of the top 10 for me. And I'll just run through it real quick. I think Russell ends up at Sacramento at 6. Moutier probably still goes to Denver at 7. Stanley Johnson still same thing in Detroit. But I do think the Charlotte Hornets realized that Frank Kaminsky was the wrong selection there, and they probably would have taken Miles Turner, who ended up going a couple slots later, and Bobby Portis, who went way late in the first round, would have finally gotten into the top 10 and gotten to Miami instead of Winslow going there. So that's where I think. But I think the biggest mover I have is probably Portis, and obviously Booker up into the top 3.
Listen, I completely agree with you. To me, what I would find interesting is then, if Jahlil Okafor did go at number 2 for the Los Angeles Lakers, then what would the Knicks have selected? Clearly, if Kristaps Porzingis wasn't on the board, right? I'm sorry, if Kristaps Porzingis was number 2, I felt like in realistic fashion for me, Jahlil Okafor would have gone number 2 to the Los Angeles Lakers simply because of the choice. In my fault to me, I thought that the choice of getting D'Angelo Russell was a great selection because of the fact that they needed a ball handler. They needed a ball handler even for Kobe Bryant, and they needed a ball handler for the future. It's just that his temperament and his mentality and how he was bringing himself to the fold as an NBA player, he clearly was not ready. But then that leaves the question to bear. Would D'Angelo Russell or would Emmanuel Mudiay have been a solid selection for the New York Knicks in where they were placed in their selection? Because I clearly feel like the Knicks knew that if they weren't going to get the best big man on the board or next big man, given what would happen, even if they still didn't have Robin Lopez, and obviously you have Carmelo Anthony, you still need a point guard. And I think those two guys, their temperament, they're still young and everything like that would have made an interesting dynamic. I would probably have gone on a limit to say he probably would have been playing for the New York Knicks. I think the Knicks would have ran and gotten D'Angelo Russell because they probably thought that his demeanor, his temperament, he could handle the spotlight. And even though we'd still be questioning the fact that he's capable of doing it, he would be someone that I think the New York crowd would love if he played good enough basketball. But I don't think that he would have been under this type of scrutiny that he was under playing with Byron Scott.
Well, I think it really just depends because, again, it's just a matter of how you look at it. If it's drafting, kind of like in the manner what you're saying, then that's probably very, very, very valid. And maybe even still so that the Knicks, because you see how poorly they play at the guard position. So Russell might have given them that guy in the future. But I think just knowing what you know now, and if you're doing a complete redraft, if Booker slides in the top 3, as I'm saying, and I think he does, I think the Knicks then have their choice of Okafor and Russell, and that becomes very, very difficult for them. Okafor obviously had his troubles off the court this year as well too. So, and Russell had his troubles kind of in the locker room, if you will, this year, and then not getting along with Byron Scott. So that would have been a very interesting choice for the Knicks to see, and I think that could have obviously changed where the draft kind of hinged, if you will. But those two guys definitely would have been options for New York.
Well, let me also throw this out there to you. In that same crux, I really think that the Sacramento Kings would have probably made a better move in getting Stanley Johnson at the small forward position, which would have allowed flexibility if they were entertaining the idea to move Rudy Gay. Stanley Johnson could play that 3, he could play that 4, and I think that he would have complemented the Kings offense quite well, even with the crazy George Karl still head coaching, and you would have still had gotten a dynamic combination in that front court with Cousins, Gay, and Johnson.
Yeah, and I don't have any qualms with that too. Johnson is definitely a guy who could have moved up, just as I think, Moutier and but Johnson, Turner, and even Portis, all those guys would have moved up higher, potentially, knowing what we know now. And Hazonia, the Cauley Steins of the world, those guys probably slide out of the top 10. And I'm a big fan of Hazonia.
I was going to say, what about your boy Hazonia?
That's come on, my guy. Don't get it twisted. I just feel like, Scott Skiles being Scott Skiles, and then that rotation, he really didn't get to show and prove the way that I would have.
But we should have known that Scott Skiles was going to quit on the Magic again.
Well, didn't know he was going to quit, but we know Skiles was always going to be the way that he is in terms that he grates on teams, grates on his players, and it wasn't going to be an easy go, especially for a young guy like Hazonia, and even a guy like Elfrid Payton who's there as well too. So, but either way, I think those are the guys who slide out. Kaminsky as well slides out of the top 10. If you were to look at this thing again, and again, this is we're having a little bit of fun here. Not to say that these are not going to be good players and that they can't develop. And then, if we were to look at this even a year from now, that wouldn't necessarily change, especially in the case of D'Angelo Russell. Maybe he does become the talent that everybody expected him to be. But I think right now, based on what they had in their rookie season, like I said, Kaminsky definitely is not the number 9 pick. I think Jordan will never admit to being wrong about that. But if they had to do it over again, he wouldn't have done that.
All right, Shaw. And then just out of curiosity again, because I love me some Miles Turner, where would you have seen him in as far as a team that would be in the top 10?
Yeah, I saw him at 9. Based on what I was saying, I think
he would have complimented the Hornets.
Right. Yeah, he goes in that place of Kaminsky there, because then I think everybody kind of moves up. Winslow doesn't slide to 10 like how he did for whatever reason. And again, like I said, Johnson and Moutier probably in the same relative range, if you will, and that leaves Turner and Portis.
I would even go out on a limb to tell you that I would have loved to have seen Trey Lyles probably coming in at number 10 for the Miami Heat, more so than the Heat, being fixated and focused on Justice Winslow. I think Justice Winslow is a solid guard. I think he's a solid defender type guard, but I think that at some particular point, if you knew that you were in a situation where you may not be able to keep Hassan Whiteside, that now you have this young power forward type guy that you could probably play the 5 as well too, or you still have Chris Bosh, minus not knowing that he had a situation regarding the blood clots, that you have a little versatility on that front court. And we've seen that when he's been given the minutes playing in Utah, he's a top 10 level type of player. He actually is fortunate to be where he is in Utah, but I certainly think that teams like the Miami Heat, maybe teams like the Denver Nuggets, and even the Sacramento Kings could have surely utilized him a whole lot more than what they've drafted for this past draft.
Well, I'm gonna counter you real quick. So you'd rather have Trey Lyles than Bobby Portis? You think Lyles has more upside and had a better season than Bobby Portis did in Chicago? I mean, Portis didn't get the minutes, but when he got the minutes, he was pretty solid. So that's what I was saying. I think Portis slides all the way up into the top 10.
No, but then again, to your point though, that would mean that Miles Turner, to me, I think Trey Lyles is very much in that consideration. Devin Booker and Bobby Portis. So we're talking about 4 people that would because let me put it like this: I didn't see Emmanuel Mudiay as a top 10 pick. But even though he's geared as a top 10 pick because of the fact that he plays the point guard position, and the teams that were in the lottery were looking at this from a perspective. They need a solid point guard. And the Denver Nuggets are clearly going to go that way. But I think they could have picked up someone off. Listen, they could have picked up what's our old boy, the guy that he never dies in the NBA. He always finds it. Pargo. They could have taken Janier Pargo, the Denver Nuggets, and they could have still focused their attention on getting an offensively efficient power forward, someone that can help relieve minutes from our boy. I'm losing my train of thought. No. Well, no, not Gallinari. Power forward.
In Denver, I mean, it's Gallinari, it's the Euros, Jokic, and Nurkic. Wilson Chandler was hurt this past year.
Starting power forward.
Fareed?
Yeah, Fareed. No, because seriously, I think that you're putting too much emphasis on Fareed having to be a scorer, having to be an intricate part. I know the money demands it, but we've seen in, teams like the Golden State Warriors where they have changed the philosophy about, utilizing their player and what they're bringing to the table, what type of skill set they bring to the table. We do that with Andre Iguodala, and he still proves to be an offensively efficient basketball player. He's just not dependent on doing that because his defense is what helps them win these games. So I think that you could easily do the same thing in Denver. Could have drafted an offensively efficient basketball player, learned to play better defense under Fareed, and then eventually, if you choose to move Fareed or Fareed chooses to walk away from the Denver Nuggets, now you've got your forward for the future, but his skill set would have been brazened to be catering to that to that development process. So that's what I'm saying. I'm thinking that there could have been a different strategy in place, not just because on the board this is simply the best talent that you can go with. Two or three of these guys easily could have hopped themselves off of the top 10 list very easily, because what we've seen from these guys on the bottom four outside of the top 10 surely could have catapulted them in the core in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. It's just I feel like, with Denver, they had a plan last year when in terms of even going back, looking at it holistically, they still had a plan and knew they were going to get rid of Ty Lawson. So they wanted to make sure that they solidified their point guard situation. Whatever. I think Moutier, yes, he struggled and was hurt at some point this year as well too. But I think he really acquitted himself pretty well, especially towards the end where the game started to slow down for him a little bit. And he understood what he got. And then they also got some nice balance with DJ Augustin, coming in there to mentor him a little bit as well too. So I think Moutier still fits what they were trying to do, but either way,
but at first round value though, Shaw, I guess that's what I'm saying. At first round value,
first round, you mean top 10? I mean,
top 10. Well, yes,
still going to go first round.
Yeah, well, he would definitely go first round. But again, okay, you're completely correct. I'm sorry, my fault on that. Definitely first round, but top 10. I just didn't see it. Not because of the fact that he was somewhat of an unknown enigma. I just really didn't see it where it merited it, because I just felt like there were other players that could certainly give what their expectations would have been from Moutier, and it would be effective for those teams. That they still could have gone out, could have free agency wise, picked up someone from the D League, or maybe even next year's draft, because we know that with the Denver Nuggets, it wasn't going to all turn around, after that first year. I mean, they just got Malone as their head coach. So,
well, outside of the top 10, I mean, again, like I said, if I've kicked out Hazonia, I've kicked out Cauley Stein, and you've kind of brought in Trey Lyles, but outside of that, I can't see anybody really, with the exception of Devin Booker, who ended up going at 13, who had a better season or has even more upside than Moutier does that was drafted. Again, I brought up Portis some. I don't think I would take Portis over Moutier still. But everybody else, I'm even looking at it, I don't see them having that amount of talent. So Moutier, even if he slips out of your top 10, he can't be much further than 11 or 12 because there's just not that many guys that have.
No, I agree with you there. No, definitely, I completely agree with you there. My goodness, man, we should have had we should have had Tony Touch, in the background. Well, hey. You could do that too, but we should have had Tony Touch, mixing some music in the background while we had this conversation, because this was a hell of a remix.
Absolutely, man. Well, again, as always, another spirited segment here on The Drop, and we want your opinion, everybody. Tune in. If you were redrafting, the NBA draft from 2015, who would be your top 10, and who were some of the biggest movers and shakers for your draft board if we were to do it again. As we get prepared for the 2016 NBA draft, it's always good to kind of have these conversations, man.
Most definitely. So be sure to hit us up on Facebook, or be sure to catch us on Twitter, and we'll throw it out there, man. But we definitely want to get your perspective and thoughts. I think I'm gonna get my cousin DJ Sugar Ray. I think Sugar Ray should come in there and when we do another remix, we'll do the refix of the remix. That's how we'll do things. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Drop. This has been an awesome show yet again, Shaw. It's kind of funny, man. We could be sitting here downtrodden, but the spirit that we bring to this show, I think, was truly inspired by the greatness of people like a person like Muhammad Ali, at least from my perspective. He is one of the few people that I admire, that I look up to, and what draws my inspiration to get up here and do a show with you, because I know I got to bring it. You're one of the best to do it with me. And this, to me, I feel like this is a true dedicated show for a great man like Muhammad Ali, for us to speak the truth, but more importantly, do it with eloquence, professionalism, and do it because it matters to us and it matters to the people who believe in us.
Absolutely, man. Salute to all the listeners again, as always. Salute to you as well. But most importantly, I think in this episode, salute the great Muhammad Ali, R.I.P. Ali, and we praise out to his family, man. Great show. Sad note to end it on, but definitely, I think it's a tribute, and I think people have to understand that.
Most definitely. So for The Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we'd like to thank Malachi Richardson taking a moment of time to be in our segment of the ISO. We'd like to thank you and yours for tuning in. Be sure to catch us as we continue to move forward discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. For The Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys, and we'll catch up with you next time.